At 72, I thought I had already seen everything life could throw at me. 40 years teaching second grade in Atlanta's public schools, showing children how to read, how to dream, how to believe they could become anything. I retired with dignity, with a small pension and a house I had bought with my own sweat. A 3-bedroom home in the suburbs with a garden where I planted yellow roses, my late mother's favorite. That house was my pride. Every floorboard, every doorknob, every window, paid for with years of honest work. And when my only son, Brian, told me he was marrying Ashley, my heart overflowed with joy. I thought, at last, my boy has found someone to love. How wrong I was. I decided to give them the house as a wedding gift. I renovated everything. New bathrooms, a modern kitchen, bedrooms painted in soft colors. I spent my savings, but I didn't mind. After all, it was for my son, for my own blood, for the baby I had carried, nursed, and raised alone after his father abandoned us when Brian was just 2 years old. I still remember the day I handed over the keys. Brian hugged me, said, "Thank you, Mom." But his eyes were already far away. Ashley smiled, but it was a cold smile, thin ice over deep water. I should have paid attention to that smile. 3 months later, I came by the house for a visit. I had called, left 2 messages, but when I arrived, I found my clothes, the ones I kept in the guest room, stuffed into cardboard boxes in the garage, dirty, tossed aside like garbage. Ashley opened the door, blocking my way in. "Margaret," she said, no longer pretending to call me Mom like she used to. "We need to talk about boundaries." Boundaries. The word dripped from her mouth like poison. I tried to step inside, but she wouldn't move. "Brian," I called. My son appeared behind her, shoulders slumped, eyes fixed on the floor like a scolded child. "Mom, we just need some space," he muttered. Space. In the house I had bought, in the house I had remodeled, in the house where I had dreamed of rocking my future grandchildren. But what truly broke my heart was what Ashley said next, that icy smile still on her lips. "Besides, Margaret, my family is moving in. And, well, there just isn't room for everyone." The ground vanished beneath my feet. "Your family?" I managed to whisper, my voice rough. "Yes, my parents, my brother, my sister-in-law, and their little boy. They need a place, and this house is perfect." She tilted her head as if she were explaining basic math to a child. "You understand, don't you? Family comes first." I turned to Brian, waiting for him to speak, to say something, to defend me, to remind Ashley whose house this was, who had sacrificed everything for him. But my son only looked away. And it was in that moment, standing in that garage with my clothes in filthy boxes at my feet, that I understood a devastating truth. I had lost my son long before I lost my house. What I didn't know then was that this was only the beginning. What Ashley and her family planned to do to me in the months ahead. 3 years before that day in the garage, my phone rang with a kind of excitement I hadn't heard in Brian's voice in years. "Mom, I met someone special. I want you to meet her." Back then, Brian and I were inseparable. Every Sunday he came over for lunch, my fried chicken with mashed potatoes, the recipe my grandmother passed down to my mother, and she passed on to me. We would sit for hours on the porch, drinking iced tea, laughing at silly memories. He called me 3 or 4 times a week just to tell me about his day as an accountant. When Ashley showed up that first Sunday, she was all smiles. Perfectly straightened blonde hair, manicured nails, clothes that were expensive but understated. She greeted me with a hug that warmed nothing inside me. It was like hugging a marble statue. "Mrs. Thompson," she said, holding my hand a second longer than necessary. "Brian talks about you all the time. It must be wonderful to have raised such a successful man all on your own." The word alone slipped from her mouth with a sharpness I couldn't place at the time. Pity? Judgment? Now I know it was disdain. The first months were subtle, offhand remarks here and there, always with that pasted-on smile. Margaret, can I call you Margaret? Don't you think you're a little too old for such bright colors? I mean, pink looks lovely on you, but maybe something a bit more neutral. I looked down at my pink dress, the one I had worn to church for years, the one that always made me feel pretty, and suddenly I felt ridiculous. Another time, during dinner, she tilted her head with fake curiosity. Brian told me you never remarried after the divorce. Wow, that must be so lonely. I could never live without a partner. I swallowed hard. It wasn't lonely. I had my students, my church, my friends. I had purpose. But the way she said it, with that condescending tone of pity, made it sound as if my whole life had been empty. If these situations touch your heart, don't forget to subscribe. Every day I share real stories of women who found their strength. Brian started changing little by little. First, he canceled one Sunday. Sorry, Mom, Ashley isn't feeling well. I need to stay with her. Then it became 2 Sundays, 3. The daily calls turned into weekly ones, then every other week. When I called, he answered in a rush. Mom, I'm kind of busy right now. Ashley needs me for... Well, I'll call you back later, okay? He never called back. And then came the day something inside me broke. I went to visit them at the apartment they shared. I rang the bell, and when Brian opened the door, Ashley was right behind him. Hi, Margaret, my son said. Margaret, not Mom, not Mommy. The name he had called me since he first learned to speak. Margaret. Ashley smiled, placing her hand possessively on his shoulder. Come in, Margaret. What a surprise. I had told them I was coming. I had texted 3 times. I sat on the couch I had helped Brian choose when he first moved in. Ashley served coffee in the cups I had given him for Christmas. And throughout the whole conversation, every time Brian started to say, Mom, she interrupted or changed the subject. Margaret, you must be so proud of Brian, she would say, as if I were some distant acquaintance admiring my son from afar. When I left that apartment, I cried in the car for 20 minutes before I could drive, because I understood with painful clarity. Ashley wasn't just stealing my son. She was erasing my place in his life. And the worst part, Brian let her. But I still didn't know how far she was willing to go to erase me completely from the equation. The plan she was already setting in motion at that very moment. 2 weeks after that canceled Sunday, Brian called me with news he framed as exciting. Mom, Ashley's family is coming to visit. It would be great if you came to meet everyone. I arrived at the house, my house, with a homemade carrot cake, the same one I'd brought to church gatherings for 30 years. I rang the bell on the door I had chosen myself, with delicate stained glass panels that let in the morning light in amber tones. What happened in the next few minutes was like watching a hurricane blow straight through the front door. 3 cars pulled into the driveway at once. Trunks flew open, revealing suitcases, boxes, bags. An entire family spilled out as if they were moving in, not just visiting. Robert Miller came first, a heavy-set man in his 60s, shirt-stained, cigarette dangling from his mouth. Linda Miller followed right behind, hair unkempt, glasses crooked, barking orders at everyone. Then came David Miller, Ashley's brother, with his wife Jennifer and their little boy, Tyler, who immediately began running through the house shouting. Where's the master bedroom? Robert asked, without so much as a greeting, walking past me as if I were part of the furniture. Ashley appeared, smiling. Dad, it's this way. You're going to love the view. I followed them to the bedroom I had decorated myself, beige wallpaper with delicate flowers, linen curtains that let the light in softly, a king-size bed with the quilt I had hand-stitched through an entire winter. My hands still ached at the memory. Linda Miller walked in and, without removing her mud-caked shoes, flopped onto the bed. She crossed her legs, leaving dark marks on the spotless fabric I had washed and pressed the week before. "Cozy," she declared, lighting a cigarette right there in the room. My mouth opened, but no words came out. Robert walked to the window, admired the view of my yellow roses in the garden, and, without a second thought, stubbed out his wife's cigarette on the solid oak nightstand, the one I had found at an antique shop and restored with my own hands. A dark, ugly burn mark spread across the polished wood. "This room is perfect," Robert announced, blowing out smoke. "Lots of natural light. Great view. We'll take this one." If you're feeling this pain with me, hit like and subscribe. We need to stand together on this journey. I looked at Brian, waiting for him to say something, to remind everyone that this was the house his mother had given him, that those pieces of furniture held history, memories, meaning. But my son leaned against the wall, shoulders slumped, staring at the floor like a 5-year-old being scolded. David Miller walked past me carrying suitcases. "Where's the second bedroom? Tyler needs space for his toys." "Wait," I finally managed to say, my voice hoarse. "You're staying? Living here?" Linda let out a sharp laugh. "Of course, honey. Didn't Ashley tell you? We're moving in. Rent in Atlanta is impossible, and this house is huge. It would be a waste for just Brian and Ashley to live here alone." Ashley appeared beside Brian, wrapping her arm around his possessively. "It's temporary, Margaret. Just until they get settled." But I saw the suitcases being unloaded. I saw curtains being replaced. I saw Jennifer reorganizing the kitchen, throwing out my spices and putting hers in their place. Robert strolled down the hallway, inspecting every corner like a property assessor. He stopped at the door to the third bedroom, the one I kept neatly arranged with photos of Brian as a child, with the crib I had saved for 40 years, dreaming of grandchildren. "This one will do for storage," he said. "We'll keep our stuff here. Our stuff. In my house. In the room of my dreams." I turned to Brian. My son. My only son. The baby I held for the first time in the hospital 45 years ago, promising to protect him forever. "Brian," my voice trembled. "Say something, please." He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Ashley squeezed his arm tighter, and then, in a voice I barely recognized, he murmured, "Mom, Margaret, it's just temporary. Don't make a scene." A scene. I was making a scene because strangers were invading and desecrating the house I had built with 40 years of honest work. In that moment, looking at the man I no longer recognized, I understood a truth that cut me like glass. I hadn't just lost a house. I had lost my son long before losing a single brick. But what I still didn't know was that this invasion was only the first act of a much bigger plan, and what they would do to me in the weeks that followed. A week after the invasion, I went back to the house. I still had a key. Technically, the house was in my name, though I no longer felt like I owned anything there. I needed to grab some documents I kept in the hallway closet. I slipped in quietly, not wanting to disturb anyone. The living room was transformed. New furniture I didn't recognize, photos of the Miller family on the walls where Brian's childhood pictures had once hung. It was as if my story had been erased with a rubber eraser. I heard Ashley's voice coming from the kitchen, speaking on the phone. Something in her tone made me stop in the hallway. "Girl, you have no idea what a nightmare this is," she was saying, laughing. "Margaret keeps showing up here trying to be relevant, like she still has some role in Brian's life." My heart started pounding. I should have left, but my feet refused to move. She's dead weight, you know. Old, alone. No one who really cares about her. No husband, no real friends, just those pathetic old ladies from church. Brian pities her, poor thing. But I'm not going to let her drain the life out of him forever. The words "dead weight" echoed in my head like a gunshot. 62 years of life, 40 years teaching children, raising a son alone, building a life with dignity, all reduced to dead weight. My hands trembled. I tried to rationalize, as I always did. Maybe she's stressed. Moving the whole family must be hard. Maybe I'm being too sensitive. But then Ashley went on, "Honestly, I think she has that pathetic old person clinginess. She has to hold on to Brian because she's got nothing else. Sad, but not our problem, right?" Pathetic old person clinginess. The words cut through my chest like knives. I left that house without getting the documents. I drove home crying so hard I had to pull over twice because I couldn't see the road. That night, I called Brian. I needed to hear from his own mouth that it wasn't true, that I wasn't dead weight, that the 45 years I had given him meant something. "Brian," I began carefully, "we need to talk about Ashley, about the way she's been treating me." He sighed, and in that sigh I heard impatience. "Mom, what is it now?" "Son, I overheard her saying things, terrible things about me. She called me dead weight. She said I was needy and pathetic." Silence on the other end. "Brian." "Mom." His voice came back cold, sharp with irritation. "You shouldn't have been eavesdropping on private conversations. That's an invasion of privacy." My mouth fell open in shock. "Invasion? I went into the house I bought to get my documents. The house is mine now. You gave it to me, and frankly..." His voice rose, something it had never done before. "You've always been dramatic. Always making a big deal out of nothing. Ashley's stressed trying to help her family, and you're creating problems out of thin air." "Problems out of thin air," my voice shook. "Brian, she called me dead weight, needy, pathetic." "And maybe she's right," the words exploded from him. "Maybe you are needy, always calling me, always showing up unannounced, always demanding attention. I have a wife now. Mom, I have a life. I can't be your only source of validation anymore." The silence that followed was so heavy it felt like it was sucking the air out of my lungs. I never asked to be your only source of validation," I whispered. "I just wanted to be your mother." "Well, maybe it's time you found your own purpose and stopped living through me." He hung up. I sat in the dark of my living room for hours, the phone still in my hand, those words hammering in my head. Dead weight, needy, pathetic, dramatic. If these words cut you as deeply as they cut me, you are not alone. Subscribe so we can walk through this journey together. And in that suffocating darkness, I understood with brutal clarity, my son wasn't blind to what Ashley was doing. He had chosen his side, and it wasn't mine. But what I didn't know yet was that all of this was just the warm-up. Their true plan to erase me completely was only beginning, and the next step would be so devastating that 3 weeks after that shattering phone call, my phone rang. It was Brian. For a second, my heart leapt. Maybe he had thought it over. Maybe he wanted to apologize. "Mom, Ashley is hosting a family dinner on Saturday. She'd like you to come." His voice was formal, as if he were reading from a script, but foolishly, I still held on to hope. "Of course, son. What time?" 7. "And Mom, wear something. Appropriate." Appropriate. I looked at my closet full of colorful dresses I had always worn proudly, and for the first time, I felt ashamed of them. On Saturday, I woke at 5 in the morning to prepare my special mac and cheese, the one with 3 kinds of cheese, topped with crunchy breadcrumbs, the dish I had made for Brian since he was 5 years old. It was his favorite, the one he asked for every birthday, every celebration. I arrived exactly at 7, carrying the dish still warm, carefully wrapped in kitchen towels. I rang the doorbell, my own doorbell, and waited like a guest. Ashley opened the door in a spotless white dress, her hair pulled into a perfect bun. Her eyes dropped to the dish in my hands, and something flickered across her face. Barely concealed disgust. "Margaret, you brought food." "It's Brian's mac and cheese," I said, smiling. "His favorite." She took the dish from my hands as if she were picking up trash. How cute. Come in. The dining room looked like something out of a magazine spread. White linen tablecloth, minimalist flowers, dishes I didn't recognize. The entire Miller family was already seated, Robert at the head of the table that used to stay empty, Linda beside him, David and Jennifer on the sides. Brian sat next to Ashley, and at the far end of the table, alone, a single empty chair, for me. I sat down and immediately realized I was too far away to join any conversation. It was as if I were sitting in another room. Ashley came back from the kitchen without my dish. She served tiny minimalist salads, leaves arranged like decoration. "Where's the mac and cheese?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. Linda Miller let out a loud laugh. "Margaret, dear, we don't eat food that heavy." She paused dramatically. "Health concerns. You know, at your age, you should understand. At your age." As if being 72 made me irrelevant. "But Brian has always loved that dish," I tried again, looking at my son. Brian didn't lift his eyes from his plate. Ashley answered for him. "Brian has fitness goals now, Margaret. He's in a different phase of life." Dinner went on, and I tried to join the conversations. I tried telling them about a former student who'd run into me at the grocery store, now a doctor, who thanked me for teaching her to read. "That's nice," Ashley cut in, immediately turning back to Linda. "So, as I was saying about the kitchen remodel," I tried again, mentioning an interesting article I'd read. David Miller muttered, already changing the subject. "Did anyone see the game last night?" It was as if I were invisible, as if my words had no weight, no place at the table. Then David leaned back in his chair, looking directly at me for the first time. "You know, Margaret, I don't get this older generation that doesn't know when to let young people live. You had your turn. Now it's ours." The fork trembled in my hand. I tried to grab my water glass, but my fingers shook with contained anger, humiliation, pain. The glass tipped over. Water spread across the immaculate white tablecloth, staining it. I stood quickly, trying to blot it with my napkin. "Leave it," Ashley said, her voice sharp. She rose, taking the towel with exaggerated movements, and sighed loudly, a theatrical sigh that filled the entire room. If you've ever been silenced like this, leave a comment. Together we're stronger. Don't forget to subscribe. "That's why," she said, looking at everyone except me. "Older people shouldn't be out without supervision. They just can't control even basic movements anymore." The silence that fell over the table was deafening. I looked at Brian, my son, waiting, always waiting for him to defend me. He dabbed his mouth with his napkin and said quietly, "Ashley, it was just an accident." That was all. Not, "My mom doesn't need supervision." Not, "Stop talking to her like that." Just that minimal, weak, pathetic defense. I rose from the chair, my legs unsteady. "I need to go." No one tried to stop me. As I passed through the kitchen, I saw my mac and cheese dish, untouched, abandoned on the counter like trash. I drove home with tears burning my eyes, but something different growing in my chest. It wasn't just sadness anymore. It was anger, and that anger was beginning to speak louder than my pain. But what I still didn't know was that this dinner was part of a larger plan, and their next move would be so calculated, so cruel, that finally, 2 days after that humiliating dinner, I had to go back to the house. I had left my wallet there, realized it when I got to the supermarket and couldn't pay for my groceries. The humiliation of asking the cashier to cancel everything still burned. I called ahead, as I had learned to do. Ashley answered with a voice too sweet. "Of course, Margaret. Come by whenever you like. We're heading out now, but the door's open." I walked into that house I no longer recognized. I found my wallet on the living room table, right where I had sat watching my own invisibility. I picked it up and was about to leave when I felt the urgent need for the bathroom. The guest bathroom was locked. I went upstairs to what had once been my room of dreaming about grandchildren, now turned into the Miller family's office. The adjoining bathroom was open. When I finished and went to wash my hands, I saw a notebook lying open beside the sink. I hadn't meant to read it until I saw my name. Plan for M. M. Margaret. My heart started pounding faster. The handwriting was Ashley's, that perfect rounded script she used to fill out birthday cards dripping with fake sweetness. I read the first line with my hands beginning to shake. Phase 1, establish territory and authority. Below it, a list. Redecorate completely. Remove every trace of her. Family occupies all SP. I blinked, wiping the tears that had started to fall. Subtle comments about age and forgetfulness. Make others witness episodes. Plant the idea she needs professional help. Phase 4, full legal transfer. Convince Brian to put the house 100% in our name. Documents already prepared. Check with Attorney Johnson. She signs believing it's an insurance update. Final objective. M, out of the picture. Brian fully ours. House ours. No interference from her in anything. The edges of my vision went dark. I gripped the sink to keep from collapsing. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't oversensitivity. It was a deliberate, meticulous, cruel plan to erase me from my own son's life. With hands shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone, I photographed every page, every poisonous word, every calculated step of my destruction. I went downstairs like an automaton, got into my car, and called Brian. He answered with that impatient tone that had become his default. "Mom, I'm at work. I found a list of Ashley's." My voice came out steady, though my whole body trembled. "A detailed plan to cut me off from you, to make me look crazy, to steal the house." Silence. "Brian? Mom." He sighed, and in that sigh there was fatigue, irritation, more conspiracy theories. "It's not a theory. It's written. I took photos." Phase 3. Question her mental capacity. "It's all here, Brian, in Ashley's handwriting." "You broke into our bathroom and went through my wife's private things." His voice rose. "This is exactly the kind of behavior that worries me, Mom." "Behavior? Behavior?" My voice cracked. "They're planning to make me look insane. They're planning to steal the house I bought." "You're seeing things that aren't there. You're creating stories in your head." He paused. "Maybe it's time we thought about a place more appropriate for your age." The world stopped. Appropriate place? A place where you'd have supervision, Mom, where trained people can take care of you, for your safety. The words fell like lead. "You're talking about a nursing home." It wasn't a question. "I'm talking about your well-being. You're clearly not okay. These paranoias, these accusations against Ashley. If your heart is breaking like mine, subscribe. This story is for all of us who've been disbelieved." "I have photos. Brian!" I screamed at my son for the first time in my life. "It's documented." "Photos you took by invading our privacy. Probably just shopping lists or something you misinterpreted." His voice had gone dangerously calm. "Mom, I love you, but you're scaring me. I'll look into some good, comfortable places. We'll talk about it this weekend." He hung up. I sat there in the car, clutching my phone, the photos still glowing on the screen, undeniable proof of the conspiracy against me, while my own son called me insane. And in that moment, something inside me broke. Not from sadness, from clarity. They weren't going to stop. And if I didn't fight back now, with everything I had, I would end up exactly where they wanted me. Locked away somewhere, medicated, silenced forever. But what I didn't yet know was that their next move would be even bolder. And very soon, I would be forced to make the hardest decision of my life. 3 weeks after that phone call about the appropriate place, I received a formal invitation by text, not from Brian, but from Ashley. Margaret, we are organizing a family lunch on Sunday. Noon. It is important that you be present. There are matters to discuss. Matters to discuss. The words sounded official, cold. My stomach turned, but I replied that I would be there. I spent the entire week unable to sleep. I rehearsed a speech in my head 1,000 times. I would show them the notebook photos, demand respect, remind Brian who I was, what I had done for him. On Sunday, I arrived wearing a navy blue dress, neutral, the way I had learned they preferred. I rang the doorbell, and Ashley opened it, smiling that smile I now recognized as nothing but a mask. Margaret, come in. We're in the dining room. The formality in her tone made me freeze. I stepped inside, and my blood ran cold. It wasn't a family lunch. It was an ambush. Robert and Linda Miller sat on one side of the table, Ashley and Brian on the other. And at the head, a man in a gray suit I had never seen before, leather briefcase open in front of him, documents neatly arranged. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, standing to shake my hand. "I'm Richard Chen, a family mediator. Please, have a seat." Family mediator. My feet refused to move. "Sit down, Mom," Brian said, without looking at me. I sat in the only empty chair, isolated, as always, 7 faces staring at me like a jury. Richard Chen cleared his throat. "Mrs. Thompson, I've been retained by the Thompson-Miller family to mediate a delicate situation affecting everyone involved." Thompson-Miller. As if they were one unified family, and I was the outsider. "After extensive conversations with all parties," he continued, flipping through his papers, "we've concluded that the current living arrangement is neither sustainable nor healthy for anyone." "Living arrangement?" My voice came out rough. Ashley leaned forward, her expression painted with false concern. "Margaret, everyone here loves you, but we need to be honest. This house belongs to the young family unit, Brian and I, building our future, my parents and brother restarting their lives." "And me?" I managed to ask. Heavy silence. Richard Chen slid a paper across the table. "We've prepared a generous proposal. The family is committed to covering 6 months of rent in an apartment suited to your needs. A smaller place, easier to maintain, safer for someone your age." 6 months. As if my entire life could be reduced to 6 months of charity. "The house was a gift," my voice began to shake. "I gave it to my son." "And it was a beautiful gift," Linda Miller interrupted. "Syrupy sweet. But gifts are given without conditions, Margaret. You can't give something and then keep controlling how it's used. I'm not controlling anything. You invade our privacy," Ashley cut in, her voice rising. "You snoop through our things. You spin wild conspiracy theories. You create dramatic scenes. You are making it impossible for us to live in peace." My chest tightened. "I photographed your plan, Ashley. Phase 3. Question her mental capacity. It's documented." Richard Chen raised his hand. "Mrs. Thompson, unfounded accusations help no one here." "Unfounded? I have the photos." "Photos of personal lists you've twisted into paranoia," Ashley shot back, her eyes gleaming. "Exactly the kind of behavior that worries us." I turned to Brian. "My son. My only son. Brian, you know I've never lied to you in my life. Look at me and tell me you don't see what's happening here." He finally looked at me, and what I saw in those eyes, the same eyes that once lit up when I picked him up from school, when I made his favorite meal, when I taught him to ride a bike, was shame. Not shame of them, shame of me. "Mom," he said quietly, "sign the papers. Please. This is getting embarrassing." Embarrassing. 45 years of unconditional love reduced to embarrassment. Something inside me snapped. Not from sadness, from fury. I stood up so fast the chair clattered to the floor. "Everything you've done for me." My voice rang through the room. "Everything. You want to talk about everything?" I pointed at Ashley. You showed up in his life 3 years ago. 3. I carried him for 9 months, gave birth alone because his father ran, worked 2 jobs to pay for diapers, food, clothes. My voice was breaking, but I didn't stop. I sat with him every night doing homework. I held his hand when he had pneumonia at 7, and I thought I'd lose him. I paid every penny of his college while living off instant noodles to save money. If you've ever exploded defending your dignity, leave a comment. We're not alone in this. I turned to Robert and Linda. And you? You showed up with suitcases like invaders and had the audacity to say, "I'm the problem." I turned back to Brian, tears streaming freely now. I gave you the house, yes, because I loved you, because I believed you loved me back. I raised you alone. I sacrificed my entire life for you. Mom, stop. Brian stood, his face red. Stop being dramatic. You're embarrassing us. You're embarrassing yourself. The word dramatic, the one Ashley had planted, the one they all now repeated like a mantra, hit me like a punch. Embarrassing, I repeated, my voice dropping to a deadly whisper. You steal my house, conspire to declare me insane, offer me scraps like charity, and I'm embarrassing you. I grabbed my bag. My hands were still trembling, but my voice came out steady. I'm not signing anything. This house is in my name, and if you want to take me out of it, you'll have to drag me. I walked toward the door. No one tried to stop me. Ashley shouted after me, "You'll regret this, Margaret. We'll sue. We'll prove you're incompetent." I stopped at the threshold, turned one last time. Try. But this time, I'm fighting back. And as I walked out of that house, for the first time in months, I felt something other than pain. I felt power. But what I didn't know was that this declaration of war would have consequences I wasn't yet prepared to face. I drove to the small one-bedroom apartment I still kept. Thank God I had never sold it. It had been my refuge when I needed to stay close to the school where I taught before retirement. Now, those 500 square feet were all I had left. I went in, locked the door, and finally collapsed. I fell to my knees right there on the living room rug, still in my navy dress, still with my bag slung over my shoulder. My hands clutched the fabric over my chest, trying to hold the pain that felt like it was tearing me apart. And I prayed. It wasn't a beautiful prayer, not the kind we say in church with the right words and reverent tone. It was a desperate plea, raw, ripped open. "Lord," I began, my voice already breaking. "Lord, where did I go wrong?" The tears came so fast I could hardly breathe between them. I gave all my love. I sacrificed everything, everything. And now here I am, alone, empty, discarded like trash. I pounded the floor with my fist. God, did I do something wrong? Did I love too much? Give too much? Why does the son I carried, raised, loved more than my own life? Why does he treat me like I'm worth nothing? The questions tumbled out one after another, unanswered, echoing off the empty walls. I worked until my feet bled, skipped meals so he could eat, gave up a marriage, gave up having other children, gave up traveling, gave up living. Everything for him. And for what? For him to call me dramatic. For them to offer me 6 months' rent like charity. I dragged myself to the sofa, pulled a cushion against my chest, and let the memories flood me. I remembered the night Brian was 7 and caught pneumonia, his fever so high the nurses whispered in worry. I spent 3 nights awake at his bedside, holding his tiny hot hand, praying without stopping. Don't take my boy, Lord. Please, take everything from me, but not him. God had listened. Brian survived. I remembered the 2 jobs, teacher by day, office cleaner by night, coming home at 2 in the morning with my back aching, knees swollen, and still getting up at 6 to make breakfast for Brian. He never knew his college money came from me scrubbing executive bathrooms while he slept. I remembered the day I was offered a scholarship for a master's in Boston, a dream I'd had for years. But Brian was 15 then, in a rough stage of adolescence. I can't leave him now, I thought. I turned it down, buried that dream with so many others. If you've ever sacrificed your dreams for your children, subscribe. Let's walk this path of rediscovery together. I remembered every birthday when I bought presents with counted pennies, every Christmas when I pretended I didn't want anything so he could have more. I remembered every time I swallowed my pain so he wouldn't have to carry it. I lived for him, I whispered into the darkness. I forgot to live for me. The night crept on. Midnight, 1 a.m., 2. I was still praying, still crying, still searching for answers in the silence. God, tell me what to do. I'm so tired, so lost. I don't know who I am without being his mother anymore. And then, at 3 a.m., when my tears finally dried and only a hollow ache remained in my chest, something happened. A different kind of silence filled the apartment. It wasn't empty, it was full, dense, warm, and inside that silence, I felt, more than heard, a voice. It wasn't audible, but a certainty forming in the center of my chest, spreading outward like heat. Your dignity does not need their validation. I drew a deep breath, and the voice continued, or maybe it was my own heart finally waking up. Rise, daughter. This is not the end. I opened my eyes. The living room was still dark. I was still alone. It still hurt. But something had changed. For 45 years, my entire identity had been tied to being Brian's mother. When he rejected me, I thought nothing was left. But there, in that sacred 3 a.m. silence, I understood. I had existed before Brian was born. I had worth before he existed. And my worth didn't disappear just because he chose not to see it. Margaret Thompson wasn't just Brian's mom. She was the teacher who taught hundreds of children to read. She was the woman who survived abandonment and loneliness. She was the warrior who built a life with her own hands. I rose from the sofa, legs trembling but firm. I washed my face with cold water. I looked in the mirror, puffy eyes, tear-streaked face, but there was something new in my gaze. Determination. I will not give up, I told my reflection. I didn't come this far, survive everything I've survived, just to be erased now. I picked up my phone, 4 a.m., but I knew I needed help. I couldn't fight this alone. I opened my contacts and stopped at a name, Grace Johnson, my friend of 50 years. The one person who had always told me hard truths when I needed to hear them. I typed a message. Grace, I need you. Tomorrow, please. It's urgent. The reply came within seconds, as if she were awake too. I'll be there at 8, with coffee and strength. Hold on, sister. I lay down as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon. I didn't sleep, but for the first time in months, I didn't feel despair. I felt something I never expected to feel again. Hope. But what I didn't yet know was that Grace would bring more than coffee and words of comfort. She would bring the name of someone who would change everything. At exactly 8 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I opened the door, and there was Grace Johnson, my friend of 50 years, since we were young teachers sharing the same staff room. She held 2 cups of coffee and wore that expression I knew so well. Firm love, no sugarcoating. Come in, I whispered, my voice still hoarse from crying. Grace came in, set the coffees on the table, and pulled me into a tight hug. She didn't say anything for a full minute, just held me while new tears fell. When we finally sat down, I told her everything, every detail. The Miller family's invasion, Ashley's written plan, the meeting with the mediator, Brian calling me dramatic, the suggestion of a nursing home. I talked without stopping for 40 minutes, waiting for Grace to hug me again, to tell me everything would be okay, to give me the sympathy I so desperately needed. Instead, she set her cup down with a firm thud and looked me straight in the eyes. Margaret Thompson, I love you like a sister, but I need to tell you a hard truth. I blinked, surprised at her tone. You need to stop being a victim and start being a warrior. The words hit me like a slap. Grace, No. She held up her hand. Listen to me. That house is yours. You bought it with your sweat. You have legal rights. You have documents. And more important than any paper, you have dignity. But Brian is a grown man who has made terrible choices. He chose a manipulative woman over his mother. That hurts, I know. But sitting here lamenting won't change a thing. Grace leaned forward. Margaret, you're letting them steal not just your house, but your identity, your strength. Who are you? The teacher who taught half this city to read, or the little old lady crying in the corner, waiting for crumbs of affection? The words were harsh, but necessary. Something inside me stirred. I went through this, Grace continued, her voice softer now. I never told you at the time because I was ashamed, but my own brother tried to take my mother's house from me after she died, said I was too old to live alone, that he would take better care of the property. My eyes widened. Grace, I didn't know. I was 65 when it happened. I spent 6 months believing he was right, that I was a burden, until a friend gave me the same wake-up slap I'm giving you now. She took my hand. I found a lawyer. I fought. It was hard. It was painful. I lost relatives who took his side. But do you know what I gained? What? My dignity back. My house. My peace. Grace squeezed my hand hard. Margaret, it's never too late to reclaim your life. Never. I felt something shift inside me, as if her words were breaking chains I had placed on myself. But I don't know where to start, I admitted, my voice small. Grace released my hand, opened her purse, and pulled out a business card. The paper was thick, expensive, with raised gold lettering. Elizabeth Chen, Family Law and Elder Protection. I looked at the card as if it were a weapon. She helped me when I needed it, Grace explained. She's good, she's honest, and she's not afraid to take on manipulative families. But Margaret? She waited until I met her eyes. She can only help you if you decide to fight. What if I lose? What if Brian never speaks to me again? What if you win and take back your dignity? Grace countered. Margaret, Brian already isn't speaking to you. He's already discarded you. You have nothing left to lose except the little pride you still have. The words were brutally honest, but true. Also, Grace continued, pulling out her phone, I need to show you something. She opened Facebook and held the screen out to me. Did you see what Ashley posted yesterday? My stomach dropped. It was a picture of Ashley and Brian in the living room, my living room, smiling. The caption read, Finally, our home is complete and at peace. No drama, no toxicity, just love and real family. No drama, no toxicity, as if I were the problem. She's controlling the narrative, Grace said calmly. She's painting you as the villain to anyone who asks. If you don't fight, this will be the story everyone believes. If this injustice angers you the way it angers me, subscribe. Let's walk this road of dignity and rescue together. I looked at Elizabeth Chen's card, then at the photo of Ashley smiling in my house, then at Grace, my friend of 50 years, offering me not pity, but power. Call her, Grace said, sliding the card toward me. Today, now, while you still have that sacred anger burning in you, because tomorrow, the pain might paralyze you again. I picked up the card with trembling hands, looked at the phone. What if she can't help me? What if she can? Grace smiled. Margaret, you taught 1,000 children to be brave. Now it's time to be brave for yourself. I took a deep breath, picked up my phone, dialed the number. 3 rings. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. Office of Elizabeth Chen. Good morning. My voice shook, but the words came. Good morning. My name is Margaret Thompson. I need help. They're trying to steal my house and my dignity. Grace squeezed my free hand, smiling with pride. And for the first time in months, I felt that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't alone in this fight. But what I didn't yet know was what Elizabeth Chen would uncover once she began to investigate, and how those discoveries would change everything. 2 days after that call, I was sitting in the waiting room of Elizabeth Chen's office, 10th floor of an elegant building in downtown Atlanta, overlooking the city where I was born, raised, and worked for 40 years. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. I had rehearsed what I would say 1,000 times, but now the words seemed to scatter. "Mrs. Thompson?" A woman in her 50s appeared at the door. Impeccable suit, hair pulled into a bun, but with kind eyes. "I'm Elizabeth Chen. Please, come in." The office was warm and welcoming, not intimidating as I'd feared. Family photos lined the shelves, plants brightened the windows, and she guided me to a comfortable chair. "Coffee, water," she offered. "Water, please." My throat was dry. She poured, then sat down across from me, not behind her desk, but in a chair beside mine, creating closeness. "Grace told me a little about your situation," she began gently, "but I'd like to hear everything from you, slowly, no rush." And then I broke. I told her everything all over again. The house, Brian, Ashley, the Miller family, the written plan, the mediator meeting. The more I spoke, the more ashamed I felt. Ashamed for being so naive, so foolish, so weak. "I know it must seem like I began, my voice cracking. "Like I should have seen it sooner, like I should have been smarter, like—" Elizabeth lifted her hand gently, stopping me. "Mrs. Thompson, stop." Her voice was firm, yet kind. "You have nothing, absolutely nothing to be ashamed of." I looked at her, startled. "You are the victim of financial and emotional abuse at the hands of your own family. Family manipulation is one of the cruelest forms of abuse because it comes from the very people who are supposed to protect us." She leaned forward. "You weren't foolish. You were human. You were a mother, and they used your love against you." The tears came again, but this time they were different. They were tears of relief because someone finally saw, understood, validated. Elizabeth picked up a pen and notepad. "Let's get to the facts. Whose name was originally on the deed to the house?" "Mine, Margaret Ann Thompson." "And when was it transferred?" 2 years ago. Brian said it was for tax purposes, that I'd still live there, that it was just paperwork." Elizabeth jotted down quick notes. "Did you fully understand what you were signing at the time?" I hesitated. "I trusted him. I didn't read it carefully." "He's my son. I thought—" "That's called coercion through familial trust," Elizabeth interrupted. "It's legal grounds to challenge the transfer." My heart skipped. "Challenge? Does that mean I could—" "Get the house back, possibly, but first, I need to see all the documents." She kept asking questions about my income, about the renovations I paid for, about any written communication with Brian or Ashley. I showed her the photos of Ashley's notebook, the Plan for M. Elizabeth studied each image with growing intensity, her expression hardening. "Mrs. Thompson," she finally said, setting my phone aside and looking me directly in the eyes, "I need to be blunt with you." My stomach tightened. "I've lost everything, haven't I?" "No, quite the opposite." Elizabeth took a deep breath. "What your son and his wife have done, property transfer under false pretenses, social isolation, gaslighting about your mental state, threats of forced institutionalization, all of this constitutes elder abuse." The words didn't register. Elder abuse. "It's a crime in Georgia," she said firmly. "State law, 16(5)(100), financial exploitation of a vulnerable person over 65. It can lead to criminal charges, not just civil." My head spun. Criminal? But he's my son. And that makes it even more serious in the eyes of the law. Elizabeth took my hand. Mrs. Thompson, I know this is hard to process, but you need to understand, you have rights, you have legal protection, and most importantly, you have a very strong case. How strong? Written documentation of their plan, messages, witnesses to the so-called mediation, questionable property transfer, documented family isolation. She paused. Mrs. Thompson, I've seen hundreds of elder abuse cases. Yours is one of the clearest I've ever encountered. Something inside me straightened. A spine that had been bent for months finally began to rise. What do I need to do? Elizabeth smiled, not with pity, but with respect. First, we gather all the documentation, the original deed, receipts for the renovations, every communication with Brian and Ashley. Second, we file a formal complaint. Third, she hesitated. Mrs. Thompson, this will get ugly. Brian will have to choose between facing legal consequences or doing the right thing. He's already made his choice, I said, and my voice came out stronger than I expected. He chose her. Then you need to choose yourself. Elizabeth stood, extending her hand. Are you ready to fight? I looked at that hand, like a bridge between the Margaret who had been trampled and the Margaret who could rise again. I gripped it tightly. I'm ready. But what I didn't know was that when Elizabeth began digging deeper, she would uncover things about Ashley and the Miller family that went beyond my worst nightmares. A week after that meeting, Elizabeth called me. It was 8 a.m. on a Thursday, and the urgency in her voice told me she had discovered something. Mrs. Thompson, can you come to the office today? There are things you need to see in person. I arrived in under an hour. Elizabeth was waiting with a thick folder on the table and an investigator by her side, a black man in his 60s, gray hair, serious expression. This is Marcus Williams, a private investigator who's worked with me for 15 years, Elizabeth introduced. Marcus, this is Margaret Thompson. He shook my hand with respectful firmness. Mrs. Thompson, I conducted a full investigation into your situation. And, well, it's worse than we thought. My stomach dropped. I sat down. Marcus opened the folder, revealing stacks of documents, photos, and printed screenshots. Let's start with the house, he said, placing a document in front of me. The transfer happened exactly as you described, 2 years ago. The papers you signed were presented as an insurance policy update. In reality, they were full property transfer documents. I saw my signature there, naive, trusting, signing away my own ruin. That constitutes fraud, Elizabeth added. Misrepresentation of legal documents. It's enough to void the transfer. But there's more, Marcus continued, turning pages. I investigated Ashley Miller's background, or rather, Ashley Rodriguez Miller, Patterson Johnson. I blinked. What? 3 prior marriages, he explained, sliding marriage certificates across the table. The first at age 22 to Michael Rodriguez. It lasted 2 years. Ended in a financial dispute. She demanded half of a property his father had gifted the couple. My blood ran cold. The second, at 27, to Thomas Patterson. He was a widower with a daughter. Marriage lasted 3 years. Ended when his daughter accused Ashley of trying to transfer her father's bank account into her own name. My God. The third, at 32, to David Johnson, an older man, retired, with multiple properties. That marriage lasted only a year. He caught her attempting to alter his will without his permission. There was a police inquiry, but he chose not to press charges. Marcus pushed photographs toward me. Ashley has a pattern, Mrs. Thompson. She targets vulnerable men, alone, with families, or with assets, usually too kind-hearted to see the trap. She marries, isolates, manipulates, drains what she can, and when it's no longer useful, she moves on to the next. My hand covered my mouth. Brian, he doesn't know this. Most likely not, Elizabeth replied. She uses a different name with each marriage, erases her tracks, She's meticulous. And the Miller family? I managed to ask. Marcus turned more pages. Robert Miller has a history of minor financial scams. 2 bankruptcies filed. Linda Miller has been sued 3 times for bad checks. David Miller owes over $80,000 in credit card debt and loans. The pieces fell into place with nauseating clarity. They needed the house. Desperately, Marcus confirmed. They were on the verge of being evicted from their apartment. That's when Ashley met Brian. Elizabeth took my hand. Mrs. Thompson, your son was a target from the very beginning. The tears burned, but wouldn't fall. There was too much anger for tears now. There's one more thing, Marcus said, hesitating. We found something unexpected. He laid another document on the table, a deed I recognized within seconds. The property in Savannah, I whispered. You remember it? Elizabeth asked. My mother left it to me, a little house near the beach. I didn't visit much, kept it rented through an agency for years. My voice faltered. Wait, don't tell me. Marcus nodded gravely. Transferred into Brian's name 18 months ago. The papers you signed were presented as a lease renewal. My world spun. They stole 2 properties? And more, Marcus went on, opening his laptop. That property in Savannah is currently worth $340,000. Brian listed it for sale 2 weeks ago. The buyer is set to close next Monday. Monday? My voice came out shrill. That's in 4 days. Exactly why I called urgently, Elizabeth said, already picking up her phone. We need to file an injunction today, now, to block the sale and freeze all assets until this is resolved. If you feel this same outrage, this righteous indignation, subscribe. Let's walk together until justice is done. I looked at the pile of documents, evidence of systematic betrayal, calculated manipulation, blatant theft disguised as family love. They planned everything, I whispered, from the beginning. Yes, Elizabeth confirmed, but now we have a plan too, and Mrs. Thompson, ours is legal. Marcus closed the folder. I also have recordings of the Miller family discussing how they plan to split the money from the sale. I spoke with neighbors, gathered witnesses to their behavior. We have a solid case. Elizabeth was already typing on her computer. I'll be filing 3 actions: annulment of the fraudulent transfers, an emergency injunction, and a criminal complaint for elder abuse. By morning, they'll wake up to court officers at their door. I looked at those 2 people, practically strangers a week ago, fighting for me with more ferocity than my own son. Why are you doing this? I asked, my voice breaking. Why do you care so much? Elizabeth paused her typing and looked at me. Because justice matters, Mrs. Thompson. Because dignity matters, and because if we don't fight for our mothers, our grandmothers, our elders, who will? Marcus added gently. And because you deserve it, plain and simple. In that moment, sitting between these warriors who barely knew me but defended me fiercely, I understood something profound. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes, family is the people who choose to stay when blood abandons you. We're going to take them down, I said, and this time my voice didn't shake. Elizabeth smiled. Yes, we are. But none of us expected how Brian would react once the papers were served, and how that reaction would reveal something that changed everything. The following Sunday, I wore my best dress, a vibrant purple one I had always worn with pride, no longer the muted tones Ashley preferred. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. I arrived at Mount Zion First Baptist Church, my church for 40 years. I knew every pew, every stained glass window, every crack in the wooden floor. It was sacred ground, my refuge. But when I pulled into the parking lot, I saw them. Brian and Ashley stepping out of his car, a new car, I noticed, probably bought with money that should have been mine. Ashley wore a pristine white dress, her hair perfectly styled, smiling at people as they greeted her. Performing holiness. Something inside me ignited. I got out of my car and walked straight toward them. My steps were steady, determined. I was no longer Margaret begging for scraps of love. I was Margaret who knew her rights. Ashley spotted me first. Her eyes rolled so dramatically that several people around noticed. She nudged Brian, whispering something. Brian saw me and literally turned his body, trying to walk the other way. Brian Michael Thompson. My voice rang out across the parking lot, clear and firm. Don't you dare turn your back on me. He froze. People stopped, watching. I walked until I was only steps away. I looked into my son's eyes, the same eyes I had seen open for the first time 45 years ago, and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. I carried you in my womb for 9 months. I fed you from my breast. I taught you to walk, holding your little hands when you stumbled. I taught you to read, sitting with you every night until you memorized every letter. I taught you to pray, kneeling by your bed every night. My voice didn't tremble. And you threw me away like trash. You stole from me. You lied to me. You conspired to declare me insane. People were whispering now, shocked. But let me tell you something, Brian. I stepped closer. You may have stolen my house. You may have sold my dignity for a woman who uses you as a pawn. But you will not steal my voice. Not anymore. Ashley let out a loud, caustic laugh. Oh my God, she's melting down in church. How embarrassing. She turned to the people around her as if searching for allies. Do you all see this? This is the drama we deal with every day? Dignity? She looked at me with disdain. Old woman, you have nothing but bitterness and delusion. The parking lot grew tense. Some people stepped back, uncomfortable. Others looked at Ashley with growing disapproval. And then a deep voice cut through the air. Ashley Miller. Everyone turned. Pastor William Harris, a 70-year-old man who had led that church for 3 decades, stood at the entrance, wearing an expression I had never seen before. Holy fury. He walked toward us slowly, each step deliberate. Ashley Miller, he repeated, stopping beside me. You are in the house of God, and here in this congregation we honor our elders. Ashley's face drained of color. Mrs. Margaret Thompson, Pastor Harris continued, turning to me with gentleness, has been a member of this church since before you were born. Ashley, she taught Sunday school. She fed the homeless at our community events. She gave when she had nothing to give. She prayed for this community for decades. He looked at Brian, and the disappointment in his eyes was palpable. And you, Brian, I baptized you. I was there when your mother, alone and without a husband, raised you with dignity and faith. I saw every sacrifice she made. Brian couldn't meet his eyes. Pastor Harris turned to the small crowd that had gathered. Hear me well. Elder abuse, whether financial, emotional, or spiritual, is sin. It doesn't matter if it comes from strangers or from our own flesh and blood. God sees, God knows, and God is not pleased. Ashley tried to speak, but he raised his hand. No, you've said enough. You called a woman of God a bitter old woman on sacred ground. You mocked her pain. You laughed at her suffering. His voice lowered, but grew even more powerful. You are not welcome in this congregation until you truly repent and make restitution. Silence fell like a weight. That goes for you too, Brian, Pastor Harris added. Your mother belongs here. You must choose if you stand with her or against her, but you cannot stand against her and remain in this church at the same time. Brian opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. Pastor, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. Pastor Harris took my hand, holding it with respect. I understand that this woman is in need of justice, and if her church cannot give her that, it does not deserve to be called a church. He gently guided me toward the entrance. Come, Sister Margaret. Your place is inside, not out here being humiliated by those who should honor you. As we walked, I heard Ashley hissing furiously at Brian. Let's leave. This church is full of old fools anyway. But I also heard Sister Dorothy, an 80-year-old who had attended for 50 years, mutter, "Shameless girl." Always knew something was off about her. Inside the church, I sat in my usual pew. Pastor Harris stepped to the pulpit and began the sermon, not with the planned text, but with Proverbs 23:22. "Listen to your father, who gave you life, and do not despise your mother when she is old." I cried through the entire sermon, but this time, they weren't tears of shame. They were tears of validation, of community, of strength. After the service, dozens of members embraced me, offered support, asked how they could help. My church, my true family, surrounded me with a love Brian had never managed to give. When I returned to my car, I had 20 new phone numbers, 5 offers of places to stay if I needed, and 3 offers to testify in court. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that I was no longer alone in this fight. But what I didn't expect was the call I'd received that very night, a call that would completely change the course of everything. On Monday morning, at 7:15 a.m., 2 court officers rang the doorbell of my house, where Brian and Ashley were still sleeping soundly, probably dreaming of the money from Savannah. I know because Elizabeth called me the moment she confirmed delivery. "Papers served," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "Action for annulment of fraudulent transfers, injunction blocking the Savannah sale, and formal elder abuse complaint. All filed. It's official now." My heart pounded so hard it hurt. And now? Now they have 10 days to respond. And Mrs. Thompson? Elizabeth paused. "Be prepared. They won't take this quietly." She was right. By 8:30, my phone was blowing up with messages. Not from Brian, he never had the courage to face me directly, but from unknown numbers, distant acquaintances Ashley had recruited. "How could you do this to your own son? You're a terrible mother. He only tried to help you, and you drag him into court." I blocked them all. But the real storm began on social media. Ashley crafted a long, elaborate post filled with carefully constructed lies. My friend Grace showed me because I had deleted my Facebook months earlier. My heart is broken. After years of caring for my husband's mother, offering her our home, enduring difficult episodes of her mental health, this is how she repays us, with a lawsuit. Brian is devastated. He gave her everything: time, money, patience. And now, instead of gratitude, we face false accusations that could destroy our family. Please pray for us. Family destroyed. Une masse ingratitude. Hurts. Bitter mother. The post included a photo of her and Brian embracing, his face twisted in theatrical suffering. Within hours, it had hundreds of comments, many from strangers, offering support to Ashley, calling me a monster, a user. But then something unexpected happened. Sarah Martinez, a former student of mine, now a 35-year-old attorney, commented, "Interesting narrative, Ashley. But I've known Mrs. Thompson for 28 years. She taught me to read when no one believed in me. She bought my school supplies out of her own pocket. She came to my graduation when my own parents didn't, and never, in almost 3 decades, have I seen a shred of mental instability in her. Maybe the real story is different." Then came Marcus Johnson, another former student, now a doctor. Mrs. Thompson was my second-grade teacher. She kept me from dropping out. She visited me in the hospital when I broke my leg. I've known this woman for 32 years. If she's filing a lawsuit, it's because there's a very serious reason. And I know Ashley Miller too, or should I say Ashley Rodriguez, or Patterson. How many last names have you collected, Ashley? The tide began to turn. Dozens of former students joined in, sharing stories. About the time I bought lunch for a child who was hungry. The time I stayed late helping a student with dyslexia. The hundreds of small kindnesses I had forgotten, but they remembered. And then the church neighbors joined. Sister Dorothy commented, "I saw this young woman Ashley with my own eyes call Sister Margaret a bitter old woman in the church parking lot." I saw her son turn his back while his mother begged for respect. Don't lie to the internet. God sees everything. More people joined in. Ashley's narrative was collapsing in real time. But the final blow came from an unexpected source. David Johnson, Ashley's third ex-husband, commented, "For anyone considering believing her, Ashley Miller stole $75,000 from me during our marriage. Forged my signature on documents. Tried to have me forcibly institutionalized when I found out. I have everything documented. If Mrs. Thompson is suing, it's because Ashley is doing to her exactly what she did to me. Beware of this woman." Ashley's post was deleted in less than 2 hours, but screenshots had already spread everywhere. On Wednesday, I got a call from Pastor Harris. "Sister Margaret, I need to inform you. We had a leadership meeting yesterday. Brian has been formally removed from his position as deacon until this situation is resolved." My heart clenched, not with joy, but with grief for how far things had gone. "It wasn't an easy decision," Pastor continued. "Brian has been a member for a long time, but we cannot have someone in spiritual leadership who is under investigation for elder abuse. We simply cannot." "I understand," I whispered. "And Margaret, the church is with you, officially. We are willing to testify if needed, to offer financial support for legal fees, and our community hall for any meetings you require." Tears fell. "Thank you, Pastor." That night, Ashley tried again, this time with a video, crying, begging for understanding, but the comments were merciless. "Crocodile tears. 3 ex-husbands with the same story. The problem is you. Mrs. Thompson deserves justice. If you're watching justice being done, subscribe. This journey isn't over, and you won't want to miss what comes next." On Friday, Elizabeth called again. "Mrs. Thompson, they want to negotiate?" My blood ran cold. "Negotiate what? Return of the properties, a formal public apology, financial compensation for damages. In exchange, you withdraw the criminal charges." I sat in silence, processing. "But Mrs. Thompson," Elizabeth continued, "you need to know you don't have to accept. We have a strong case. We can take this all the way." I looked out the window of my small apartment, thinking of the house I had built, the dreams I had buried, the dignity I had nearly lost. "I want to think," I replied, because the truth was, part of me wanted full justice. I wanted to see them pay for every tear, every humiliation. But another part, the part of me that was still a mother, despite everything, wondered if there was a path that wouldn't completely destroy my son. And that decision would be the hardest one I would ever have to make. But before I could decide anything, something happened that no one expected, something that changed everything once again. The following Monday, I woke to my phone exploding. Not hate messages anymore, calls from unknown numbers, reporters asking for interviews. Grace showed up at my door at 7 in the morning, holding the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. "Margaret, you need to see this." The headline on the local section read, "72-year-old former teacher battles family abuse. Son and daughter-in-law accused of fraud and elder exploitation." My photo was there, an old one, from when I received Teacher of the Year 20 years ago. Next to it, a recent photo of Brian and Ashley leaving the courthouse. The article told my story, not Ashley's version, but the truth. Elizabeth had given a detailed interview, with my permission, presenting facts, documents, Ashley's behavioral pattern. Mrs. Margaret Thompson dedicated 40 years to educating underprivileged children in Atlanta, the journalist wrote. Now, at 72, she fights to reclaim not only her property, but her dignity. The article included quotes from former students. Sarah Martinez. "She changed my life. She taught me I had worth when no one believed in me." Marcus Johnson. "If it weren't for Mrs. Thompson, I wouldn't be a doctor today. She paid for my school supplies for years." And then, the part that made me cry. More than 200 former students have publicly spoken out in support. Among them, Federal Judge Keisha Brown, District Attorney James Washington, and State Representative Linda Garcia, all educated by Mrs. Thompson in Atlanta's public schools. Margaret, Grace squeezed my hand. You built an army without even knowing it. That day, my phone never stopped ringing. Former students from decades ago, ones I barely remembered, reached out. One, now a restaurant owner, offered free meals. Another, who owned a salon, offered hair and makeup for when you walk into court and need to shine. But the real turning point came when Judge Keisha Brown, that shy little girl I had taught to read at 7, called me personally. Mrs. Thompson, I can't interfere in your case for ethical reasons, but I can ensure it's assigned to a judge who takes elder abuse very seriously. And I can testify as a citizen, if necessary. District Attorney James Washington also called, Mrs. Thompson, you saved my life in 3rd grade, literally. You pulled me out of an abusive home, reported it to social services. Now it's my turn to fight for you. I'm personally taking over the criminal charges against your son and his wife. Meanwhile, Ashley and the Miller family's story was collapsing publicly. Investigator Marcus had shared his findings with the press. The next article read, Ashley Miller, 3 marriages, 3 financial fraud allegations. The local tabloids were even harsher. Marriage con artist targets elderly woman after trapping son. Robert Miller lost his job on Tuesday. The company wanted no association with an elder abuse scandal. David Miller came under investigation for tax evasion after public records revealed huge discrepancies. On Thursday, Elizabeth called, her voice euphoric. Mrs. Thompson, you need to go to your window, right now. Why? Just look. I walked to the window of my apartment. Down on the street, there was a group of people, 20, maybe 30, holding signs. Respect our elders. Justice for Mrs. Thompson. Teachers matter, elders matter. Margaret Thompson taught us. Now we defend her. My hand flew to my mouth. Grace stood beside me, smiling softly. They're your students, she said gently, and neighbors, and church members. They'll hold vigil until next week's hearing. I went downstairs. When I appeared at the building's entrance, everyone clapped. Sarah Martinez hugged me, crying, Mrs. Thompson, you never gave up on us. We won't give up on you. A local TV reporter was filming. He asked for a quick interview. With trembling legs, I said, I just want to say, thank you for believing in me, for reminding me I have worth. And to any elder watching this, if you're suffering abuse, don't stay silent. You deserve dignity, you deserve respect, and it is never, ever too late to fight for yourself. The clip went viral. By Friday, it had 2 million views. Elder advocacy groups contacted me, wanting to use my case in national campaigns. Universities asked me to speak about family abuse. Magazines wanted my story. But the most unexpected consequence came on Saturday. I got a call from a California area code. Mrs. Thompson, my name is Patricia Zhang. I'm a producer at CNN. We'd like to do a national segment on your case. Elder abuse is a silent epidemic. Your courage could inspire thousands. My head spun. I'm just a retired teacher. No, ma'am, Patricia replied kindly. You're a symbol of dignity, of resilience, of refusing to be silenced. You are exactly what the country needs to see. I agreed. The following Monday, on the morning of the preliminary hearing, I arrived at the courthouse and nearly fainted. There were at least 100 people outside. Signs, banners, TV cameras. My students, now adults, some with gray hair, formed a human corridor to the entrance. We stand with you, Mrs. Stand. Thompson, justice will be done. You taught us to fight. Now we fight for you. On the other side, Brian and Ashley slipped in through the back entrance, escorted by security, trying to avoid the crowd. If you're witnessing the power of community, of collective justice, subscribe. The end is near, and you need to be here. Inside the courtroom, every seat was filled. District Attorney Washington stood present. Judge Brown sat in the gallery as an observer. Dozens of former students filled the benches. When I walked in, everyone rose in silent respect. Brian, seated with Ashley and their attorney, saw it. He saw the crowd rise for me. He saw the respect, the love, the validation he had never given me. And for the first time since this began, I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen in months. Shame. Real, deep, undeniable shame. Ashley was whispering furiously in his ear, but he wasn't listening. He was staring at that sea of people who loved me, respected me, defended me. And he finally understood what he had lost. But was it too late? The hearing was about to begin. And what would happen in the next few hours would determine not only the future of the properties, but the future of any relationship left between mother and son. After the preliminary hearing, where the judge ruled that all properties would remain frozen until final trial, I returned home exhausted. I drank chamomile tea, tried to read my Bible, but the words danced on the page. I finally fell asleep around midnight, restless, full of fragmented dreams. At 3 a.m, my phone rang. I woke with my heart racing, thinking it was an emergency. The name on the screen froze me in place. Brian. I hesitated, but something made me answer. Hello? The sound I heard on the other end shattered me, even after everything. It was my son crying. Not manipulative crying, not performative. It was desperate, broken sobs, the sound of someone finally waking from a nightmare and seeing the destruction they had caused. Mom. His voice was raw, soaked in tears. Mom, I messed up. I messed up so badly. I sat up in bed, switching on the light. My hand trembled as I held the phone. Brian, no, let me speak, please. He choked, struggling to control his sobs. Ashley, she manipulated me. From the beginning. I see it now. Her family pressured me, isolated me from you, made me believe you were the problem. Heavy silence. I was afraid of losing her, he went on, voice breaking. Afraid of being alone again, and I let that fear turn me into a monster. I let them treat you that way. I let them steal from you. God, Mom, I let them plan to put you in a nursing home. My own tears began to fall, but I stayed silent. I saw today in court, he whispered. I saw all those people stand for you, hundreds of them, and I realized you built an army of love while I built a prison of lies. He took a shaky breath. Please, Mom, please forgive me. I'll make it right. I'll return the houses. I'll divorce Ashley. I'll... Stop. My voice came out firm, cutting through the darkness. Brian Michael Thompson, listen to me, and listen well. I wiped my tears. I stood up. I needed to be on my feet for this. You weren't afraid of losing Ashley, I began, each word deliberate. You were afraid of being a man, of making the right choice even when it was hard, of defending your mother even if it cost you your comfort. Mom, I'm not finished. My voice hardened. You say Ashley manipulated you. Maybe she did. But Brian, you had free will. Every time she asked you to diminish me, you chose to obey. Every time I begged for respect, you chose silence. Every time I needed you, you chose her. I heard him sob harder. You saw her plan written out. Phase 3, question her mental capacity. And even then, when I showed you the photos, you called me paranoid. You suggested a nursing home. You knew, Brian. Deep down, you knew, but you chose to pretend you didn't. I know. He could barely speak. And do you know what hurts the most? My voice cracked, but I pushed on. You didn't choose Ashley out of love. You chose the wealth I built over the woman who built you. You chose 2 houses over 45 years of sacrifice. You chose material comfort over the mother who worked 2 jobs so you could eat. Utter silence on the other end. I carried you when you couldn't walk. I fed you when there was no food for me. I paid for your college cleaning offices in the middle of the night while you slept soundly. I turned down a master's program in Boston, buried my dreams, lived for you. My voice was strong now, steady. And you discarded me. You called me dramatic, dead weight. You let that woman call me a bitter old hag in the house of God. And now, only because the tide has turned, only because you stand to lose everything, you call me crying. Mom, Where was this repentance when I begged? Where was it when I showed you the evidence? Where was it when Pastor Harris confronted you? Brian was sobbing so hard he could barely breathe. I don't know. I don't know who I am anymore. I know who you are, I answered, my voice calm now, calm and final. You are a 45-year-old man who chose greed over character, who chose the approval of a con artist over integrity, who chose villainy over courage. Mom, please. But you know what, Brian? I took a deep breath. I still love you. I always will. You came from me. Nothing changes that. But love doesn't mean accepting abuse. Love doesn't mean being a doormat. And self-love means I choose my dignity over your comfort. Heavy silence, broken only by his sobs. So what does that mean? He asked, his voice small, like a child's. It means I'm going to court. I'm taking back what's mine. I'm demanding full justice. And you are going to face the consequences of your choices. And after, he whispered, after the trial, is there still space for me in your life? I closed my eyes, the question that had haunted me for months. I don't know, Brian. Honestly, I don't. That depends on you proving through actions, not words, that you've truly changed, that you understand the gravity of what you did, that you're willing to make real restitution, not just give back houses, but rebuild the trust you shattered. A long pause. And Brian, that will take years. It may never be the same again, because you killed something in me. The mother who blindly believed in you. That mother is gone. I heard him choke back a sob. But maybe, I continued more softly, maybe something new can be born. A relationship built on mutual respect, not one-sided sacrifice. But that only happens if you do the work. Therapy, accountability, real change. I'll do it, he promised desperately. I'll do anything. Then start by divorcing Ashley. Today. And by testifying against her in court. Proving that you stand on the side of truth, not convenience. Silence. Brian? I'll do it. I'll call a lawyer as soon as the sun comes up. Good. Now let me sleep. I have an important hearing in 3 days. I was about to hang up when I heard him whisper, Mom, I really do love you. I always have. I just forgot to show it. Tears streamed freely down my face now. I know, son. And that's why it hurts so much. I hung up. I sat in the dark for a long time, holding the phone, letting the tears fall without trying to stop them. They weren't tears of weakness. They were tears of mourning, mourning the son I once had, the relationship we lost, the innocence that would never return. But they were also tears of release. Because for the first time, I had set boundaries. I had demanded respect. I had chosen myself. And even though it hurt, even though it was terrifying, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Peace. But what I still didn't know was whether Brian would actually keep his promise, and how his decision in the next 72 hours would determine not only the outcome of the trial, but the future of any relationship left between us. Wednesday morning dawned clear in Atlanta. I woke at 5 without an alarm. I had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in my head. But now that it was here, my hands were cold and my heart was racing. I put on the navy blue suit I used to wear at school graduations, the same one I wore when I watched my students receive diplomas, begin new lives. It felt fitting to wear it on the day I began my own new life. Grace picked me up at 7. "Ready, warrior?" "As ready as I'll ever be." The courthouse was packed when we arrived. TV cameras outside, reporters calling for statements. But what stopped me cold was the crowd of former students forming a silent corridor to the entrance, holding up signs of support. I walked through that corridor with my head held high, greeting each one. Sarah, Marcus, dozens of others. My community, my true family. Inside, the courtroom was full. Every bench occupied. Elizabeth was waiting at the front table, organized, confident. "Mrs. Thompson, are you ready?" I nodded. And then they entered, Brian and Ashley through the side door, escorted. And what I saw shocked me. Ashley was unrecognizable, hair disheveled, no makeup, simple clothes, nothing of the polished, calculating woman I had known. Brian looked worse, sunken eyes, slumped shoulders, a face gray with guilt and exhaustion. Their lawyer was young, clearly inexperienced, carrying a thin folder. No money to hire anyone better. The judge entered, Honorable Judge Patricia Williams, a 60-year-old black woman whose very presence commanded absolute respect. All rise. We sat when she indicated. Case number 2024 CV 8847. Margaret Thompson versus Brian Thompson and Ashley Miller. Action for annulment of fraudulent transfers and elder abuse. She looked over her glasses. Proceed. Elizabeth stood, and for 2 hours presented a devastating case. Documents showing how I'd been tricked into signing over my properties. Photos of Ashley's notebook with the detailed plan for M. Text messages between Ashley and the Miller family discussing how to get rid of the old lady. Bank records proving I had paid every cent of the renovations. Neighbors testified about how the Miller family invaded, destroyed, disrespected. Pastor Harris testified about the parking lot incident at church. Marcus, the investigator, laid out Ashley's entire history, 3 marriages, 3 financial scams. Ashley tried to defend herself when called. I only wanted to help my family. Her voice came out shrill, desperate. They had nowhere to live. Brian loved me. I thought we were building a life together. Judge Williams cut her off, her voice like a blade. Mrs. Miller. She took off her glasses, cleaned them deliberately, and put them back on. In this courtroom, helping family does not mean stealing from the one who helped you first. It does not mean tricking a vulnerable elder into signing away property. It does not mean conspiring to have her declared mentally unfit. Ashley paled. You have a history, the judge continued. 3 previous marriages, 3 identical patterns of financial manipulation. This is not love. This is predation. She turned to Brian. Mr. Thompson, stand. Brian stood, trembling. You are a 45-year-old man, an accountant, educated, raised by a woman of exemplary integrity. Her voice grew harder. And you allowed, no, you actively participated in, the theft and abuse of your own mother. Do you have anything to say? Brian opened his mouth, closed it, looked at me for the first time. His voice cracked. I have no defense, Your Honor. I did the unforgivable. I betrayed the one person who always loved me unconditionally, and I will carry that shame for the rest of my life. Tears streamed down his face. They weren't performative, they were real. The only thing I can say is that I am divorcing Mrs. Miller. I filed the papers yesterday, and I will fully cooperate to restore everything I stole from my mother. Ashley whipped her head toward him, mouth open in shock. Brian, what are you? Enough, Ashley. He stared at her. Enough lies, enough manipulation. You destroyed my life. You almost destroyed my mother. We're done." Judge Williams watched everything in silence. Then she struck the gavel. Order of the court. The properties in Atlanta and Savannah are to be immediately returned to the name of Margaret Ann Thompson. Transfers are declared void for fraud. My heart leapt. Brian Thompson and Ashley Miller will jointly pay moral damages of $50,000, emotional damages of $30,000, and all legal costs incurred by Mrs. Thompson. She paused, looking directly at Ashley. Additionally, I am referring this case to the district attorney for potential criminal charges of elder abuse, document fraud, and conspiracy. Mrs. Miller, I strongly suggest you obtain criminal counsel. Ashley collapsed into her chair, sobbing. As for Mr. Thompson, the judge continued, considering his late cooperation and apparent remorse, I will recommend leniency to the prosecutor if restitution is made fully and without resistance. She struck the final gavel. Case closed. Justice has been served. The room erupted in applause. Former students stood, cheering. Elizabeth hugged me tightly. But I looked at Brian, my son, bent over the table, crying like I had never seen him cry before. Part of me wanted to run to him, to hold him, to say it was all right. But it wasn't all right. And maybe it never would be again. Judge Williams called me as I was about to leave. Mrs. Thompson, a word? I approached the bench. She spoke softly, just for me. My grandmother went through something similar. I was 12. I saw it all. She never got back what she lost because she didn't have the courage to fight. You fought. And you didn't just win back your properties, you won back your dignity. Thank you for being an example. Tears burned my eyes. Thank you, Your Honor. Outside, reporters swarmed. I gave a brief statement. Justice is not about revenge, it's about dignity restored. I hope my story inspires other elders not to accept abuse in silence. But while cameras flashed and people celebrated, my heart was heavy, because I had won everything in court. But I had lost my son in the process. Or was there still a way back? 3 days after the ruling, I officially received the keys. The bailiff handed them to me in a sealed envelope, along with documents confirming that the properties were once again in my name, Margaret Ann Thompson. I held those keys for a long time, feeling their weight. They weren't just metal, they were a symbol of justice, of dignity restored, of a new beginning. Grace rang my doorbell early Saturday morning. Ready to go home? But when I opened the door, she wasn't alone. Pastor Harris was there, along with Sarah, Marcus, and at least 20 former students, all holding cleaning supplies, boxes, and encouraging smiles. "We thought you shouldn't have to do this alone," Sarah said gently. My heart overflowed. We drove in a convoy to the house. When I parked in front, I sat for a moment, staring at the structure that had once been my dream, then my nightmare, and now it was my chance to begin again. "Come on," Grace opened my door. "Your house is waiting for you." I placed the key in the lock, turned it, the door opened. The smell hit me first. Cigarettes, mildew, neglect. The house I had once kept immaculate was ruined. Dirty walls, stained carpet, broken furniture. But instead of despair, I felt determination. "Let's get to work," I announced. For 6 hours, we worked. The men hauled out the furniture the Miller family had brought. Cheap, ugly, soulless. The women scrubbed walls, washed windows, ripped down the hideous curtains Ashley had hung. Pastor Harris walked with me through each room, praying, "Lord, reconsecrate this space. Remove every negative energy, every painful memory. Make this house once again a home of peace." In the master bedroom, the one Robert and Linda Miller had profaned, I found a cigarette burn on the nightstand my father had built by hand. I ran my fingers over the scar, and instead of rage, I felt release. "I can fix this," Marcus said behind me. "I have a friend who's a carpenter. It'll be perfect again." No, I answered softly. Leave the mark. It's a reminder that I survived. That some scars tell important stories. He nodded, understanding. In the basement, digging through old boxes, I found something that stopped me cold. Photos of Brian as a child, dozens of them. His first day of school, little uniform too small, toothless grin. Kindergarten graduation, holding a cardboard diploma. His 10th birthday, face smeared with frosting. I sat on the dusty floor, clutching those photos, and cried. But they weren't tears of weakness or regret. They were tears of release. Release from the illusion that I could control his choices. Release from the guilt that I had failed as a mother. Release from the weight of carrying a love that wasn't returned. I loved you the best way I knew how, I whispered to the picture of the boy he once was. And that has to be enough. Grace came down, sat beside me, held my hand in silence. She didn't need to say anything. Her presence was enough. When the sun began to set, the house was transformed. Clean, bright, breathing again, but still empty. I had sold or given away almost everything before signing the house over to Brian. Let's go shopping tomorrow, Sarah announced. New furniture. Your choice, your style. Nothing from the past unless you want it. That night, before everyone left, I did something. I went to the garden, the same garden where I had planted yellow roses decades ago. Many had died during the Miller family's occupation, but some had survived, stubborn and resilient. On my way home, I had bought new seedlings, 45 of them. One for each year I had dedicated to Brian. With Grace and Pastor Harris beside me, I planted each one carefully, praying over every seedling. These will grow without me forcing them, I said aloud, hands dirty with soil. They'll bloom in their own time, without pressure, without expectations. Just like I'm going to grow now. No more forcing love. No more sacrificing my dignity for someone else's approval. Pastor Harris placed a hand on my shoulder. Amen, sister. Amen. Grace watered the seedlings with me. You know these roses will outlast any hurt, right? I looked at the garden, half destroyed, half resilient, completely mine. I know, and so will I. When everyone had gone, I was alone in the house for the first time. I walked through every room, lighting candles, touching the walls, reclaiming the space. In the bedroom that would be mine again, I stopped at the window, looking out at the moonlit garden. And for the first time in over a year, I felt something I'd forgotten how to feel. Peace, real peace, not conditioned on anyone's behavior, not dependent on external validation. Just the peace of knowing I had fought, I had won, and, more importantly, I had chosen myself. If you're feeling this peace with me, this sense of starting over, subscribe. The final chapters bring complete transformation. My phone buzzed. A message from Brian. Mom, can I visit? Just to see if you're okay? I promise I won't come in if you don't want me to. I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to answer immediately, but the wiser part knew I needed time. Time to put down my own roots again. Time to find myself. Time so that any future relationship would be built on a solid foundation, not desperate need. I typed, "Not yet, Brian. I need time, but thank you for asking." I sent it and turned off my phone, because that night was mine, that house was mine, that life was mine, and for the first time, that was more than enough. But what I didn't yet know was that in the months to come, something unexpected would happen. Something that would show me that new beginnings can come from places we never imagine. 6 weeks after moving back home, I was watering the roses when I heard the gate creak. I looked up and froze. Brian stood at the entrance, hands in his pockets, posture slumped. He had lost weight, a lot. His face was hollow, eyes sunken with dark circles. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 2 months. "Mom," his voice was hoarse, "I know you asked for time, but I needed to come." Please, just listen for 5 minutes. If after that you want me to leave, I'll go and never show up unannounced again." I slowly set the watering can down. My heart raced, but my voice came out steady. 5 minutes. He nodded, grateful. He didn't try to come in. He stayed outside the gate, keeping a respectful distance. He took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. I destroyed the only person who ever loved me unconditionally. The only person who sacrificed everything for me. And there aren't enough words to express the horror of what I did. His voice trembled, but he went on. "I've spent the last weeks in therapy, twice a week. My therapist made me sit down and list every time I failed you. Every time I chose Ashley over you. Every time I called you dramatic when you were really crying for help." Tears began streaming down his face. "The list is 17 pages long, Mom. 17 pages of failures, of betrayals, of moments I turned my back when you needed me most." He wiped his face with the back of his hand. "I divorced Ashley. The process is almost finalized. I lost my job. I couldn't focus. I'm living in a tiny apartment with Marcus, that old college friend. He's letting me stay there out of mercy." "Brian," I began. "No, please, let me finish." He looked me straight in the eyes for the first time. "I didn't come here to ask you to take me back. I didn't come to ask for things to go back to the way they were. I know that's dead. I killed it." His voice broke completely. "I just came to say that I see now. I see the monster I became. I see every tear I caused. I see the incredible woman I had the privilege of calling my mother, and I see how I shattered that privilege, and I will carry that shame for the rest of my life. As I should." He placed an envelope in the mailbox. "This is the first restitution check, $500. It's all I have this month after rent. I'll send one every month until I've paid the $80,000 I owe. It's not about the money, it's about responsibility." I stayed silent, processing. Part of me, the mother I had always been, wanted to run to him, hold him, tell him all was forgiven. But another part, the woman who had grown through pain, knew true forgiveness was more complex than hugs. "Brian," I began carefully, "I need to tell you something, and you need to hear me out to the end." He nodded, wiping his tears. I walked to the gate, but didn't open it. We stood separated by the bars, physically and symbolically. I've spent weeks praying about this, asking God for wisdom, and I came to one conclusion. I drew a deep breath. "I forgive you." His eyes widened, filling with hope. "But," I continued firmly, "forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean everything goes back to the way it was. It doesn't mean you automatically regain access to my life, my home, my heart." The hope in his eyes faltered. "You made choices, Brian. Horrible choices with real consequences, and forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. You destroyed trust that took 45 years to build. That trust won't be rebuilt with apologies or a few months of therapy." My voice softened, but didn't lose its strength. "I love you. I will always love you. You came from me. But I've learned something crucial these past months. Self-love comes first. And self-love means I will no longer sacrifice myself for you. I will no longer put your needs above my dignity." "I understand," he whispered. "You will always have a mother who prays for you," I continued, tears now streaming down my own face. "Every night, on my knees, I pray for your healing, your growth, your redemption. But you will no longer have a mother who sacrifices herself for you. No more doormat, no more crumbs of affection accepted as love." He was openly sobbing now. "If someday, and I mean someday, I don't know when, we can rebuild a relationship, it will be different. It will be based on mutual respect, healthy boundaries, and consistent actions. Not pretty words, actions." "I'll work on that," he promised, "even if it takes the rest of my life." "Good. And Brian." I gripped the bars of the gate. I sincerely hope you succeed, not for me, for you, because you deserve to be a better man than the one you became. You deserve to live without this shame consuming you, but that journey is yours. I can't walk it for you." He nodded, unable to speak. "Now go," I said gently but firmly. "Keep going to therapy. Rebuild your life. Learn to love yourself. And maybe, in a distant future, we can have a new relationship. Not the old one. That's dead. But maybe something different can grow." Brian took a step back. "Thank you, Mom, for listening, for forgiving me, even though I don't deserve it, and for teaching me, once again, what dignity really means." He turned to leave, then paused. "Mom, you look happy? Happier than I've seen you in years." I smiled through tears. "I am, Brian, I really am." "I'm glad for you," he said, and for the first time, it sounded genuine. "You deserve it." I watched him walk to an old car I didn't recognize, get in, and drive away. I stood there for a long time, holding onto the gate, letting tears fall. But they weren't tears of regret. They were tears of final release. I had forgiven, but I had kept my boundaries. I had loved, but I had loved myself first. And that, finally, was enough. Grace appeared on the porch. She had witnessed everything from inside. "You okay?" "I am," I replied, turning to her. "I really am." Because for the first time in my entire life, I had chosen dignity over maternal guilt. I had chosen peace over approval. I had chosen myself. And the sky hadn't fallen. God hadn't abandoned me. In fact, I felt His presence stronger than ever. I went back to the roses, picking up the watering can. "Let's finish watering these beauties. I've got lunch to prepare." "Lunch?" Grace asked. "Yes. I invited Sister Dorothy and a few other ladies from church. I thought I'd make my famous fried chicken." Grace smiled. "Margaret Thompson, you're coming back to life." "Not coming back," I corrected, smiling in return. "I'm beginning. For the very first time, truly." And it was true. At 72, my life wasn't ending. It was finally beginning. Only 2 chapters left in this incredible journey. Subscribe so you won't miss the ending. But what I didn't yet know was that God had surprises in store for me. Surprises that would prove it's never, ever too late to begin again completely. 6 months after the trial, my house had become something I never imagined, but something that made perfect sense. Half of it remained my home, cozy bedrooms, the kitchen where I cooked my favorite recipes, the living room where I watched my shows while sipping tea. But the other half had been transformed into something greater, the Margaret Thompson Center for Elder Support, helping women facing family exploitation. The idea was born 3 months earlier, when Sister Dorothy came to me at church, crying. Her daughter was trying to take her house, using tactics eerily similar to Ashley's. "Margaret, I don't know what to do. Can you help me?" We sat for hours. I shared my story, my legal resources, Elizabeth Chen's name. But more than that, I offered something she desperately needed: validation, someone to believe her. A week later, 2 more women from the congregation came to me with similar stories: financial abuse from nephews, emotional manipulation from sons-in-law, forced social isolation by daughters-in-law. "This is an epidemic," Grace said when I told her about the 3rd woman. "And you have a platform, Margaret. You have a story. You have a house. Use it." And so the center was born. I renovated the rooms that had once been the Miller family's offices. Now they held comfortable sofas, a library with legal resources, and a computer for research. Every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, I opened the doors for women who needed guidance, support, or simply ears that would believe them. I charged nothing. I served tea, cookies I baked in the morning, and offered something far more valuable than money: dignity. Elizabeth Chen came once a month as a volunteer, offering free legal consultations. Pastor Harris led a prayer group every 2 weeks. My former students, now lawyers, social workers, therapists, donated their time and expertise. In 6 months, I had helped 23 women. 3 of them recovered stolen properties. 5 obtained restraining orders against abusive relatives. All of them regained something even more important: self-worth. And in the process, I found a purpose I hadn't even realized was missing. But life still had more surprises in store. In February, walking in the park near my home, I heard desperate barking coming from behind the bushes. I found a small dog, some kind of mix I couldn't identify, dirty, thin, shivering in the cold. "Hey, sweetheart," I whispered, holding out my hand. She sniffed me, hesitant, then licked my fingers. I took her to the vet, who guessed she was about 2 years old. "Someone abandoned her, but she's healthy. She just needs love." I looked into those brown eyes, full of fear but also a flicker of hope, and saw a reflection of my own journey. "Your name is Grace," I announced, "because grace is what both of us have received." Grace became my constant companion. She slept at the foot of my bed, followed me around the garden, curled up at my feet during the center's meetings. Visitors adored her. Many said her presence made the space feel warmer. And in March, I did something I had postponed for 50 years. I traveled, alone, to places I had always dreamed of, but never had the courage or the permission from myself to go. Savannah first, to see the property my mother had left me, now restored. I spent 3 days walking along the beach, eating seafood, reading books I had always wanted to read. Then Charleston, then New Orleans. Small trips, nothing extravagant, but each one was a declaration of freedom. I picked up forgotten hobbies, bought paints and an easel, went back to painting. Something I had loved in my 20s but abandoned when Brian was born. My watercolors of gardens and sunsets weren't perfect, but they were mine. I joined the church choir. My voice, rusty from decades of silence, slowly returned. We sang in nursing homes, hospitals, community events, and every note was a celebration of being alive. And then, in April, something completely unexpected. Samuel Richardson, a 68-year-old widower, a longtime member of the church, always polite but distant. His wife had passed 3 years earlier from cancer. He approached me after service, holding a book. "Sister Margaret, I read about your center in the church bulletin. My late wife worked in social services. She would have loved this. May I make a donation?" "Of course," I replied, touched. "Thank you." He hesitated. "And perhaps we could have coffee sometime. I'd like to hear more about the work you're doing." It wasn't a romantic invitation. It was genuine interest. But something in his respectful manner made me smile. "I'd love that." Coffee turned into lunch. Lunch turned into walks in the park. Walks turned into dinners. Samuel was kind in a way I had forgotten men could be. He opened doors not out of machismo, but courtesy. He asked my opinion and truly listened. He never tried to rush anything, never pressured me for more than I was ready to give. "Margaret," he said one June evening, walking through my garden among the roses, "you are an extraordinary woman. Not because you need someone to complete you, you are already whole, but because you choose to share your wholeness. That is rare." On a quiet Sunday afternoon, sitting on the porch with Grace sleeping at my feet and chamomile tea cooling by my side, I picked up pen and paper. Not the computer. It needed to be handwritten. It needed to have soul. For months, women had come to the center asking me, "How did you do it? How did you find the courage?" This letter was my answer. For them, for myself, for every woman who needed to hear certain truths, I began to write. Dear sister who is reading this, if you've made it this far, if my story has resonated in your heart, it's probably because you are going through something similar, or you know someone who is, and I need you to know some fundamental truths. Your dignity is not negotiable. It doesn't matter how many years you've lived. It doesn't matter how many children you raised. It doesn't matter how many sacrifices you made. Your dignity is your birthright, given by God, and no one has the authority to take that from you. Your worth does not diminish with age. The world may try to convince you otherwise. They may call you old, a burden, dramatic. But every wrinkle on your face tells a story of survival. Every gray hair is a medal of honor. You have not diminished. You have grown. You have risen into wisdom that the young cannot buy and cannot learn from books. Setting boundaries is not a lack of love. It is self-love. For decades, we were taught that a good mother sacrifices endlessly, that a good woman puts everyone else first. That saying no is selfish. Lies. All lies. God did not bring us this far, through decades of work, pain, struggle, survival, for us to become doormats for anyone, not even for our own children. Real love requires mutual respect, and respect begins with self-respect. Our wisdom deserves to be honored. We lived, we survived, we built families with almost nothing. We worked jobs that broke our bodies. We prayed through dark nights when there seemed to be no way out. That experience has value. Do not let anyone make you feel irrelevant. You are not alone. When I was at rock bottom, thinking I was the only one going through this, I discovered a liberating truth. We are thousands, millions, older women being financially and emotionally abused by their own families. But we are also thousands rising up, taking back our homes, setting boundaries, rebuilding lives. I am here. Grace is here. Entire communities of warriors are here. You do not walk alone. It is never, ever too late to start over. At 72, I thought my life was over. That without my role as a devoted mother, I was nothing. I was so wrong. At 72, I opened a support center. I adopted a little dog. I started painting again. I traveled alone. I found respectful love. I discovered purposes I never even knew existed. If I could at 72, you can at whatever age you are. 60, 70, 80, 90. Numbers do not define possibilities. Faith, courage, and community do. Forgiveness does not mean becoming a doormat. Many ask me, did you forgive your son? Yes. But true forgiveness is not forgetting or allowing continued abuse. It is freeing yourself from the weight of bitterness while keeping healthy boundaries. I can pray for Brian and still protect my peace. I can love him from a safe distance. I can wish him well without sacrificing my own well-being. That is not coldness. It is wisdom. Seek help. Speak up. Fight. If you are suffering family abuse, do not stay silent, hoping it will get better on its own. It will not. Manipulators do not change without consequences. Find an elder law attorney. Talk to a pastor, a trusted friend, a social worker. Document everything. And when you have to choose between peace and family approval, choose peace. You are a daughter of the King. Never forget, you are created in the image of God. You carry divine dignity. And God wastes nothing, not your pain, not your years, not your battles. Every tear you've shed, He has kept. Every prayer you've whispered, He has heard. And believe me when I tell you, He is preparing a victory you cannot yet see. Lift your head, daughter. You are royalty. With love, faith, and unbroken dignity. Margaret Ann Thompson, 72 years old, retired teacher, survivor, warrior, free woman. I finished the letter, my hands trembling slightly, folded it carefully, placed it in an envelope. But then Grace woke up, looked at me with those wise eyes, and I understood. This letter was not meant to be kept. It was meant to be shared. I typed it on the computer, word for word, posted it on the center's website, in the Facebook group for older women, sent it to the local newspaper asking for publication. Within 48 hours, it had been shared 15,000 times, women across the country commenting, crying, thanking. I needed to hear this. I'm 68, and my son is doing exactly this to me. You saved my life. Thank you. I'm going to show this to my mother who is suffering in silence. And there, reading those messages, I finally understood the ultimate purpose of my pain. It was not in vain. Not a single second was wasted. My story, our story, was setting women free. It was giving voice to the silenced. It was igniting courage in hearts that had almost gone out. That night, Samuel arrived and found me crying on the porch. "Margaret, what happened?" I showed him the comments. He read in silence, then pulled me into an embrace. "You turned your greatest pain into the greatest gift for others. That is legacy, Margaret." I looked at the garden where my roses bloomed, 45 of them, each one representing a year of sacrifice that did not bring the love I expected, but gave me the strength I needed. I looked at Grace, rescued and loved. At my home, reclaimed and transformed into a sanctuary. At Samuel, a man who treated me with respect. At the life I had built, stone by stone, tear by tear, prayer by prayer. And I understood the final truth. We do not need validation from those who hurt us to know our worth. At 72, I was more alive, more free, more whole than I had ever been. And if I could, so can you. Dear friend who stayed with me until the very end of this journey. If this story touched your heart as it touched mine to live it, I must ask you something. Leave a comment and tell me, have you ever gone through something like this? Do you know someone who has? What would you have done in Margaret's place? Your words could be the very embrace another woman is waiting to read. They could be the validation someone is desperately seeking. They could even save a life. Give this story a like if it moved you. Subscribe to the channel, because every day I bring real stories of women who found strength when the world told them they were weak. Tell me where you're watching from, your city, your state. I love knowing that our community is spreading across every corner of this country, uniting women in a chain of strength and faith. Tomorrow, there will be a new story, because every woman deserves dignity. Every woman deserves to be heard. Every woman deserves to know she is not alone. And you, my dear, you are most certainly not alone. We are thousands, millions, gray-haired warriors with lion hearts, and we are here, together, lifting one another up, with all my love, all my faith, and endless hope, until tomorrow. Lift your head, daughter. You are royalty.